again since August, and it's weird. I don't know if you've been working, but it's
I've done one job.
yeah, it's odd. Like it's interesting. Like every show's different. I definitely have a sense now of where I feel safe and where I don't, and what kind of work I'm comfortable doing. And so it's a bit of a process, but yeah, right now I'm in a really safe show.
That's
And
good.
yeah, and I, like that's sort of all you can ask for. It means I have to be out of town most of the time, but that's sort of just what time it is. We're all figuring out with our families, and
Yeah.
it's crazy.
At the end of the day, the fact that we can still like work and it would just take a little longer space as much.
How lucky we are. Like I know how lucky I am to have an income at all right now, and so we're just counting our blessings. Yeah.
You're frozen on me. Oh wait, now you're back.
Oh, computers.
The fact that we can at least hear each other and we'll have that conversation
Totally.
is the
And
important part.
I can see you perfectly now. Yeah, yeah. We'll just deal with it.
Yeah.
Oh, this is so great. Look at all the people. Thanks, guys.
I
And I
know.
just want
Thank
to
you.
say, like, some of these people, I have some of the best fans in the entire world, and some of them I know have stayed up at the middle of the night where they are.
Wow.
And I am just so grateful to you guys for staying up to see us. So thank you.
Yes, we appreciate that so much. Like we relaunched last year, but we were like a passion project back in the day. So the fact that you're bringing all these people and bringing us to light, we're really honored to have that, and
I'm
we are
so
very
proud to
thankful
be
for
here.
everyone that comes
I
here.
love what you guys are doing. I'm just very, very glad that you asked. So
Of
what do you want
course.
to talk about?
Are you kidding me? I'm just like, when we were thinking about like people that so the history of like WBD, I don't know, I don't remember if I've told you or not, but it was like founded by my friend Jill, who I believe should be in here. And we just knew so many cool, amazing people and creatives, especially that, they don't get their shout outs out there. Like it's either you're super famous or like we don't know anything about the working actor or like the working creative or something. And there's so many people that have gone through ups and downs just like anyone else and have worked, and it's like full-time doing the thing, but you don't hear about them. So she wanted to shine a light on these amazing people, and some of them were like starting out, and then like a few months later they got their big break or something. So it's just like we're all friends, and we just want to shine a light on that.
So great, especially for Canadians, because like we don't do a good job of publicizing and sort of representing our own people,
Yeah.
And if we don't do it, no one else will, so I'm really glad you guys are doing this.
Oh, thank you very much. Well, I wouldn't say I really think I'm kind of helping out with Jill, but I know she's listening and we do appreciate that. So yeah, that's basically what we're here for. And, we just want to hear your story and your journey. Because when we know you now, it's just like, this girl's on everything, like every other show that comes out. But obviously it wasn't always like that.
Oh God, no.
When did it kind of, or I guess we can go back further. Like, I don't like that question. Like, when did you start? Because it's
no.
But
I actually think my journey is a little bit different than I think a lot of women's, in the sense that I mean, when I was coming up anyway. So I'm 39 now, and when I always, what's that?
Looking good.
Ah, thanks. But yeah, and when I was coming up, in terms of film and television and theater too, it was always like, I say this, I've said this to a lot of people, but there was something that got said to me more than once, which was, don't get pregnant and don't turn 30. Those were like,
don't turn 30.
That was the advice. It was like, don't turn 30 and don't have a baby. And I was like, okay, first of all, so you just have to kill yourself once you hit 29 and just call it a day. And also, like, don't have children, like, because children will end your career as a woman. Like, you will never work again. And so basically, like, don't get older, like, don't mature, don't get older. And this culture of youth that we have is so destructive for women, right? And especially in media related industries. So, and you know, I really struggled in the early years. I mean, in film and TV, I was always too fat and too ethnic for everything when I was in my teens and 20s.
Oh, you
And
started
then
as a teen.
my agent, I started out doing theater. I went to an arts high school in
Okay.
Toronto called the Etobicoke School for the Arts.
Okay.
So I started doing theater, and I knew that's what I wanted to do from a very young age. And then, you know, film and TV, my agent that I'm still with, actually, I have agents. I'm with
Oh.
Catalyst TCM in Toronto and Principal's Talent in Vancouver. And my agent at Catalyst is a woman named Liz Hampton. Excuse me, Liz Hampton. And she scouted me at my high school play when I was 18.
Oh,
And we
nice.
just had our 20th, so just had our 20th anniversary. And she was my guest at a convention in Milan. So we took like this beautiful trip to a convention together to celebrate 20 years. So I'm very lucky. She's very much my team. So she and my agent, Jason Ainsley in Vancouver, is the same energy, like great support. And they were both people who were like, we love your work. We think you're awesome. We think you're going to go places, and we're going to stick by you through all of this bullshit, because so much of it when you're young is bullshit, right? Like it's all about your appearance. It's all about your body. It's all about, it has very little to do with your work for a lot of us in the early days, especially if you're a woman not white by, I mean, I put white in quotations just because it's like, I don't even understand anymore what we're talking about sometimes. Like things have been so bad representation wise for so long that it's hard sometimes to even put into words. Now we think we've made all this progress, and we've made some, but we've got so far to go
on the grand scale.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like we've gone this far, right? So in the early days, and in theater wasn't that different. Like I was given a lot of wonderful opportunities in theater, but the racism and the body shaming and the sexual harassment, like it was a tough time, you know. Like the Me Too movement has been such an emotional time, I think, for all women, most women my age in the industry, because we went through it, you know, and
it was the norm.
It was the norm. You had no voice. Like you literally had no voice. Someone reminded me, a girlfriend of mine actually, when in the sort of when the Black Lives Matter movement was really heating up again. I mean, it's been around forever, but when, you know, in the really difficult beginning of this new thrust of the movement in this year, she called me. She was really working on like figuring out her relationship to all of this and how to articulate and how to like learn more. And she called me up, and this is a woman I'd worked with a long time ago. And she said, you know, a really good friend of mine, but we hadn't worked together in years. And she said, you know, I want to apologize to you for something. And that happened like 15 years ago. And I said, oh, what was that? And I had kind of like blocked out this, you know, stuff that now would be totally unacceptable that was normal. Like, and she has this memory, and it's true. I remember it, of this designer coming into the dressing room and being like, can you buy white foundation because you're looking really dark from the audience, and you know your skin
really
just dark. And I was like, and I was so used to people saying dumb shit to me, especially because theater is so white. Like theater makes television look like hugely diverse. Like theater was so, I mean, it's getting a little better, but it was so white, you know, 20, 15 years ago. And I remember just being like, I remember saying to her, like, I'm mixed race. There's no amount of makeup that's going to change that. So sorry, like I look how I look. And she left. But I wasn't that, I was just sort of like, no, sorry, I'm not doing that. Bye. And then it was the two white women in my dressing room who turned to me after and were like, sorry, like, I don't want to overstep, but like, wasn't that really horrible? Like, are you okay? That was really awful. And I remember being like, oh, right. Like, this should not, like, I just took it in stride because I was so used to this shit, you know, or like, you know, the number of times, like, I've literally been licked by men at work on 3 separate occasions, by men playing my fathers, by men playing like the priest on a show, like this, and you couldn't, and if you reported it, you lost your job, right? So I came up in that generation, so seeing what's happening now with the Me Too movement is just so moving to me, and it's brought up a lot of emotions for a lot of us. But anyway, so the journey for me, and the irony is I was considered like really lucky, right? Because I got great parts, but I always felt in theater, in film and TV, I was too fat and too ethnic, period. But generally, few exceptions. But in theater, what I realized is that I always felt like I was made to pay for the opportunities that I was given with my self-esteem. Like that was the trade. It was like, we'll give you this great job and you should be grateful. So when you're being sexually harassed or body shamed
you should just take it,
or targeted racially, you should just be grateful. And people would say to you, like, wow, it would tell you that you were lucky to have been allowed in the room, right? And you start to believe that, and you internalize that. And especially, you know, as women, we're trained to keep our mouths shut from a very, at least in my generation. So for me, I did theater for the first like 10 years and had started to give up on film and TV around the time I turned 29. I stopped doing theater. I've been doing theater full time. And I came back to Toronto, and I was like, okay, I'm going to give film and TV a try. But then I kept getting the same feedback, like, we love her work, but, you know, maybe she could be blonde. We love her work, but, you know, what if we angled? What if we made her look a little whiter? Or like stuff that I just, and then finally I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I came home after like a PR meeting and where I was getting these kind of comments, and I said to my husband, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, it's too hard on my self-esteem. It's too,
yeah, of course.
I was like, I can't do this anymore. So like, let's just have a baby. Like, let's just, because I've been putting off having a baby because I was afraid that, like I'd been told, you have a baby,
yeah, that's
it's over, right? You gain weight and you don't sleep, you look old. Like, women are done after that. And so I you know, like, I'm just gonna do my thing,
this is
go.
me, take it or leave it.
Yeah. And like, I mean, at that point I was like, whatever. And then, and not ironically, I think it makes sense that and suddenly things started to happen. And the big thing in my career that's different from a lot of women, and that I know a couple of friends, I have a couple of friends where this was true, but it's a new thing, I think, in our culture, is that I had my son. And the year I had my son was the year my career took off. I've been working full-time in television ever since that year.
Easy.
And I think part of that, the reason for that, is two things. One is there was a cultural shift, right? So all of a sudden, it just all of a sudden you had to, right? Suddenly being a person of color, which is the term a lot of people use now. I do want to stop and just say one quick thing, which is that I'm pretty much exclusively referred to as a person of color in my work and in the media. But I always like to kind of, and I'm very proud of that, and I'm very proud to be mixed race and very proud of being a part of that community. But I do think it's really important to say that, in my opinion, the fact that I am usually an example of the person of color on a show, or, you know, that I'm one of, is a problem, right? Shows how far we have to go, right? Mm-hmm. Because I'm essentially a white presenting mixed race person. In my culture, I'm white, you know what I mean? Like, where my family's from. Problems is that it's still inequitable, right? So similarly to the way that Black women talk about, a lot of my female friends who are Black talk about women with Anglo features who are Black being given priority over women with what are considered Anglo features. That we still prioritize this Anglicizing of culture, right?
It goes deep.
It goes so deep. And so while I am very proud of being a mixed race person and very proud of being a part of that community, I also think it's really important to acknowledge that I am a part of I'm a part of that community that is still very palatable to what is still a very racist industry, right? Mm-hmm. Now, in my experience, film and TV is changing a lot really fast, right? So, and that's sort of
kinda.
Well, no. Sorry. Let me rephrase. Changing very fast in terms of women in my age group.
Oh,
right.
Yes.
Not in terms of race. In terms of race, okay. We're still like we. And in terms of women too, right? Like, we all know we have miles to go. But what I mean is that what I found in my career is that I turned 33, I guess. I think I was 33 when my son was born. I had my son, and right at that point, the culture started to shift, and people started to say, you have to hire minorities, you have to hire people of color. We need to see more Latinx women, because Latinx is a big demographic in these areas that we're so. And they started to say, there started to be more female producers, there started being more female executives, there started being an awareness that there was a whole middle-aged women, scary
Where
shit.
did they
Like, we don't
come
want to
from?
talk about that on TV, right? So women over 40, over 35, who are watching TV and who want to see themselves represented. So all of a sudden, it felt like, not overnight, but like after working for a long time, suddenly the door opened and I was standing there to walk through it. Right. And so, and since then, I mean, it's just been amazing since then. It's been sort of, but it's interesting because, you know, I read an article recently, someone sent me an article that, because people write articles about you and they don't tell you, right? And so someone found this article and sent it to me, and it was like talking about my career, and it said at one point, because it's all based on research that people do online, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, there was a 10-year gap in her, or like an 8-year gap in her television, in her acting life, because I did theater for the 8 years between my first big role on Degrassi and then starting to do TV again in my 30s. But I was doing theater. I was doing theater full time the whole time, right? But nobody gives a shit about theater. So like,
they just look at your IMDb and they just see like,
exactly,
a gap.
So they're like, I guess she just disappeared. I guess she was an accountant. But no, I was acting the whole time. But we don't respect theater in this culture very much, right? So, but in actual fact, like, I worked and worked and worked and couldn't get through. And then right at that point, the door opened and the culture changed, and I was able to do that, to step through and have, you know, and the roles are so much better. Like, the roles are so much more interesting than they used to be. And women, you know, who aren't 25 are playing leads and are playing love interests and are, you know, like, suddenly I'm getting asked to take my clothes off again. I hadn't been asked to take my clothes off since I was like 18. And now suddenly I'm like, why do you want, like, I'm 39 years old. I thought we didn't want to see that. And it's like, no, now we want to see that. Like, now we want to see women, you know, real women and like adult women being sexy and showing their lives, and, you know, and the success of all these amazing shows, Baroness von Sketch, Working Moms, like these incredibly, and Canadian shows, with, you know, phenomenal female leads who are mothers and who are mature women and who are adults, you know.
They have full lives like we all do, but they just don't get their shine like they used to, they didn't in the past. So
and I think the other thing that helped me move forward at that point in my life was, I really think that becoming a mom, you know, we spend so much time when we're young worrying about how we look, and worrying about, as actors, and worrying about where the next job's going to be, and worrying about being good enough. And then you have a kid, and suddenly it's like, you're so tired and you have so much responsibility. And it was like, I'd get an audition, and I would literally just walk in and be like, okay, yeah, here, let me just, okay, great, thank you very much, you know. And I really think it makes us more interesting. I think we become more interesting as we get older, you know.
Oh yeah, I've seen a lot of women who have taken a little break from acting, whether to like have family or like switch out because they hit that age, and then they came back because they loved it and it's their passion. And there's just that thing where it's just like, this is me, like, and they just don't care, because you just have that, I don't even know what to call it exactly, but yeah, it's exactly what you're talking about, that like confidence.
I think it's just it's a lack of bandwidth for, like, emotional and mental bandwidth for bullshit, right? Like, it's kind of like you get to the point where you start going like, I don't have the room anymore, you know? Now, don't get me wrong. Like, I still struggle with, like, I have a history of eating disorders going back to my childhood. I still struggle all the time with, you know, I see pictures of me now online, or, you know, someone puts a picture and you go like, oh, and you feel, I get self-conscious when I'm working with, I still worry about wanting to work and getting more work, and am I going to work? And so I still worry about that stuff. But I have a kind of confidence now that comes from being an adult, being a parent, you know what I mean? Like, like, and that's not just about parenting. I think that's about maturity, right? And for me, I didn't really start having any real self-esteem or real sense of self-respect until I was in my mid to late 30s. Like, it took me a long time, because the culture doesn't support us in discovering that confidence, right? We have to find it, you know?
And it would be so unfortunate if that never changed. And it's like, this maturity and this new sense of being that you have after like 30, for example. And on film TV, that's when they want to stop, when you're just like, we're just getting to the good part, that there's so much that they've been missing out this whole time because they didn't want to see women after a certain age and all these different races, and everyone's story like is always so interesting at different points of their lives that you can't just put a number on and cut it off right there.
And I mean, you know, there's the age issue, but like you said, diversity wise too, it's like we are cutting ourselves off from what is really interesting about the world when we negate representation, when we don't focus on representation. And for a couple of reasons, like the obvious one we talk about a lot is we talk about like, if kids don't see themselves represented, then they can't see themselves, they can't see their place in the world. And that's very true. But it's more than that. It's like, there's a lot of boring stories that we keep telling over and over and over again, you know, as a habit, and we could improve that storytelling by opening up our storytelling to greater representation, but also like, let's tell some different cultural stories. Let's tell some different, you know, like, or let's just allow the storytelling to not always make race and gender and sexuality always an issue. You know what I mean?
Or the
like,
obstacle to overcome, or like, that's your biggest,
That's such a great way of putting it, because I always find that so funny when it's like, you know, like you see these, it's like, it's always like, people we shouldn't be trying to overcome things like our age and our race. Like that's a fundamental, that's something positive about who we are. We shouldn't be trying to like, you know, or people say sometimes like, you know, like for women, they always pay compliments to women like, oh, you look so young for your age. Or like, you know, oh, you look so, like I had someone recently be like, you know, oh, you know, you're lucky because you'll look young because you're mixed race. You'll look young when you're older. And I'm like, why is that why I'm lucky? Like, I'm lucky because my heart pumps really well, because the women in my family have good heart health. I'm lucky because the women in my family are strong survivors who grew up in a poor country and made their way here and like just nailed what they didn't have to the wall and beat it. You know what I mean? Like, that's why I'm lucky. The fact that I have like good skin because I'm mixed race, that's not, you know what I mean? Like,
it's like, yeah, it's all tied into also, it's like, maybe you have good skin because it's your diet, because of how you grew up, because of your like background and your culture. And it's just like, there's so much more than just like, I moisturize every day and that's why I'm gonna like book forever.
Yeah, totally. And I do think that like one thing that you know, you mentioned October Faction. One thing that I loved about that show was I sat down at the first table read and I looked around and I remember being like, whew, like, because in the top 10 on the call sheet, so for people who aren't familiar, the call sheet is like the schedule for the day, and actors have a number, and your number is yours for the whole production, and number one is the number one, the lead, and then it sort of goes down, you know, as the parts get smaller and the numbers get. So anyway, so in the top 10 on that show, of the 5 women in the top 10, other than one girl who was playing a high school student, our amazing actress Aurora, other than her, I was the next youngest, and I was like 37. And it was, you know, it was Tamara and Megan Follows and Wendy Cruson and like all these women, and like playing a variety of parts, playing hard asses and playing grandmas and moms, but also playing like sexy characters. And Michelle Nolan was in that show as well. And also diversity wise, more than half of the top 10 were people of color. And I never thought I would see that in my lifetime. It seemed to, so we've made we still have a long way to go, but I do feel like I firmly believe, I think I've done maybe 20 shows in the last 10 years, and of those maybe like 6 of those were like regular roles, and I believe that of those big roles, there's one that I think I would have booked 6 years ago. The rest of them I wouldn't even have been seen for 6 years ago.
Yeah, so that does show the progress.
That recently, right? That recently. On the other hand, my friends in the Asian community, my friends in the South Asian and Black community are not seeing, and it's certainly not in the Indigenous community, like they're not seeing that. So that's why we have to be really clear that there are certain demographics that are seeing progress, and I'm in one of them, but like that does not apply across the board, as we all know, right?
It's still a major work in progress, where it's just like, you know, when you mentioned like the Me Too movement and just what everything in like the last 5-ish years, that's only 5 years out of like Hollywood has been around for like over 100 years.
Yeah.
So on that grand scale, and then also just racism, sexism in general, it's been around forever.
Yeah.
But it's still, you know, it's the first step that we're actually seeing notable change. That are you hopeful for? Do you think we'll see even bigger change?
I do.
Like a more drastic jump, or do you think it'll still be this kind of slow?
I think it's going to be I think it's going to get more and more drastic, I hope, because what I'm sensing is that people are tired of it. People are tired of the same thing. The shows, like you look at a show like Coroner, I had the good fortune, like just so lucky to be on that show, playing an amazing character. But one of the things about that show is like that show was its first season. That show was the #1 drama in Canada, and it was also utterly diverse. Like the lead is white, but all of the other like and they pride themselves in that, and they insist on it. And it is, so we're seeing that is actually what people want, right? Like so often we underestimate audiences. We think they want the same thing they've seen.
Whatever they give them, they just want whatever they give them. They don't have their own thoughts and feelings.
Exactly. And what I think a big part of the shift has been the huge breakout of cable networks, right? So for like Netflix and Hulu and all that, because they're not beholden to the same numbers, right? So I remember someone broke it down for me once, and they were saying like to get a second season on a big network like NBC or ABC. Now these are like, don't quote me on this, but this is this was how it was put to me. Like, yeah. So like to get a second season on a huge network like that, you need like, let's say 4 million viewers, right? To get a second season on a cable channel like Netflix or Hulu or whatever, you need like 425,000. Right? 1,000. Yeah. So they can take bigger risks, right? They can take bigger chances because they don't need every Joe public to want to watch it. So like, I thought it was hilarious, like when Orange is the New Black came out, and all these people were like, "Oh my God, where's that actress been? Why have I never seen her?" And it's like, because she couldn't get a job because she was black and a size 12.
I love that show. So good.
But people didn't understand. They were like, these new actresses. It's like, they're not new. They've been pounding the pavement and working their butts off for 15 years. They just couldn't get a job because it's risky, you know.
They didn't have the opportunities too. They didn't have the chance. No. So they've been outside your door this entire time, but you never let them in.
But going away from the norm is risky, right? Like, let's just make sure that everyone is white and 25, and we know people will watch because they have. Right?
Yeah.
But now I think because of cable, because of this huge breakout, and like what have been the most popular shows? Like Orange is the New Black was like a phenomenon. People went crazy for it, and people started looking around going, oh crap, well if that's what people want to see, then we better start doing that, right? So I really think that we are headed for more, not less, especially now that we're in a much more global community, kind of, especially with the pandemic and everything. Like everyone's at home watching the same shows, right? And people, and one thing I've noticed is I have a lot of friends because of Netflix who are crazy about Korean dramas, right?
It's blown up on Netflix.
It's blown up on Netflix, and people who would never, like, we didn't have access to Korean dramas before. Now it's like a whole thing where people in Canada are and in the US are loving Korean dramas, right? And so and because like a lot of the world had access to Western culture, but we didn't have access to other cultures' art, and now we do because of the internet, right? So I think I'm very hopeful. I think we have a lot further to go than we like to think, but I am very hopeful. Yeah.
Well, I am hopeful about your hope. I also just want to do it, not like I know them or anything, but just, well, I know some people on Corner, but one of the other factors that's also equally as important is not just the representation on screen, is the diversity behind the camera too, the creators, the writers. You can't just have your same old white guys and then putting like our faces on screen. That's not enough. One of the reasons why like Orange is the New Black came from females.
Exactly.
And that's all their female stories. So
And
shutting
you
that
have
out.
writers like Seneca Aaron, from the indigenous community, the Black community, who are able to who bring a perspective that is the truth, that is actually a real perspective, and if you don't have that representation behind the camera, if you don't have that representation in the writing, then you're not going to see it. No matter what you try and do, it won't be in the words, right? It won't be in the story. And so Coroner, those are two examples of writers on Coroner.
We were just talking about that.
Yeah, and on they're writers on Burden of Truth as well, because it's tough. Like, I think one of the problems is, generally speaking, the power is still in affluent white hands. Lift up
The marginalized voices.
And guys like on Burden of Truth, Brad Simpson, the creator, and Kyle Irving, the executive producer, they're both white men who use the power that they have and the money that they have access to lift up everybody else. Their writers' rooms are chock full. Kyle's company, Eagle Vision, is dedicated to Indigenous storytelling. Brad Simpson, like, when he found out what my background was, like, he actually, I told him I'd never played a Guyanese character before, which is what my background is, and he wrote it into the story. So people's representation, like, widely across the board, and that's why their shows are so good. Adam Peddle's another guy who Adam Peddle and Linda Pope, who I did Nurses and Burden of Truth with. They're Canadian executives who are like, Adam's one of my heroes because he's a white man who is so aware of his privilege and is using that knowledge to lift up Canadian artists, and so the relationship to our allies, I think, is shifting. Like, where they defer. The show I'm doing now actually is an American show called Republic of Sarah. It's a CBS Warner Brothers show, and this showrunner's a white man. And he is amazing. Like, he defers to us. He wants all of our input whenever we're talking about race, gender. Like, he's so collaborative. I can text him anytime I want. We can talk. Like, he's like, how do you feel about this? They don't do anything without checking in with us about the representation and how we feel. And so that's, it's not about like, we don't want white people doing this anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's just as simple as listening.
Yes.
And
because the reality is, we still live in a very racist culture where the money is generally still given to white people. But if those white people take that money and put it into art for
that's so good.
They're out there, and there's going to be more and more of them as my generation is now taking over, right? Those of us, like my colleagues that I came up with who went through all this shit, they're now going into their 40s, going into executive positions, and they're going to start doing that,
And we've been seeing that already. Like, I don't remember who I was talking to, just like a friend or someone, but someone that we all know very well, Reese Witherspoon, who was a big Hollywood star, like, in her youth and up, and then, but when she was getting to a certain age, she was falling into that Hollywood trap, and by her creating her own production company and just taking the power, like, she's everywhere too, and she's executive producer of the show. So it's people like that are, and like your friends as well, that are
all diverse people in the executive positions. That's where the real change is going to be, right? Like, that's sort of what it has to become. right? And I mean, you look at people like Lisa Meaches, who Lisa Meaches
I recognize the name.
so she's amazing. She's Eagle Vision is her company with Kyle Irving, who I was talking about before, and she's been an artist. I mean, she started out. I think she started out as an actor, and she's a producer. They work out of Winnipeg, but she is an example of a female executive who is changing the up. I can't even imagine what that must have been like. And she is now, like, she just won the Order of Canada. She makes the most incredible television that focuses on the Indigenous experience. She's been hugely successful. People love her shows. Like, she is, and she's the boss. She's the executive. Like,
so important.
She's at the helm, and that's so important. And then her partner Kyle, who, as I said before, is a white man, is an ally in the best sense of the word, and he can get anything done. The guy's magic, right? Like, so this collaboration, this like true collaboration between groups that didn't used to be allowed to collaborate, is making a huge difference.
Yeah. I laugh only because it's so true. It's yeah, I'm not gonna.
It's also just like bizarre to me, a lot of this stuff, because, like, for example, my husband.
Tell him I say hi.
I will. He had a bit of a crisis not recently, but a few years ago, because he started to realize, it was after we had our son, and he started to realize how much the negative representation of Latino men had impacted him when he was growing up. The fact that Latino men were always criminals, were always gangbangers and murderers, and he started to realize how much that had really hurt him as a young man. And he did, and I was very proud of him, because it's a tough decision, because you want to work. But but I remember the funniest thing to me was, like, not to toot my own horn, but like, my husband's smoking hot. Like, he's a good looking man. He's got no trouble.
I can approve that. Yeah.
Thank you.
I've seen him in person.
He used to get comments from casting where they would say, like, my agent would submit him for the
It's like a new perspective and new lens that isn't
exactly, and it doesn't reflect reality. Like, it reflects reality in a lot of the United States and Canada. Let's be real. There's still a lot of issues with diversity in our actual communities. But that's where a lot of this stems from. But, like, it doesn't even make sense. You know what I mean? Like, it's not reflective of I'm working with someone right now who told me that, as a Black woman, people say to her a lot, "Oh, you're so well spoken," because they expect her to, like, talk like a gangster. Like, but again, it's like, if you go out into the world, it's not like if you live in Toronto, you're not meeting a lot of people in general who speak like gangsters. You know what I mean? Because it's just not that kind of town for the most part. But so it's all stereotypes. None of it actually very little of it is based in fact, right? It's the whole thing's crazy. But I having said that, I remain hopeful. I guess my hope comes from the fact that I feel like after what I went through when I was younger, if it could happen for me as a school, like schools all still have very whitewashed curriculums in North America.
Because that's who created the curriculum was.
Exactly. And people still like, they don't understand, like I remember at my wedding, my uncle came up because my family's from Guyana, which it's on the Latin American continent, but it's a Caribbean culture. And my family members are predominantly Portuguese, Chinese. We have some East Indian family members as well. So my cousins, I have like Black cousins and Indian cousins and Chinese cousins. And like some of my family members are brown Chinese people with Caribbean accents. And I meet people all the time who are like, I don't understand why that Chinese man sounds like he's from Jamaica, because they don't know the history which is like, because it's actually incredibly common. Like colonialism in the Caribbean means that Beijing in Latin America and in the Caribbean has it's a very similar story across the board, but we just don't learn about it. But now with immigration, there's a huge opportunity for us, in my opinion. We have to change the way we educate, right? Like we have to change the way that we, I don't know if you should, if you don't know, and I recommend this to everyone, my friend Nicole Stamp and a colleague of hers have started this thing called bias boxes. And they're amazing. They're a subscription for kids of any age. You can. They have different age groups, and basically, it's like you get a delivery every few months, and it comes with like toys and books, and then
literal deliveries, like actual
literal deliveries with toys and books. And they can be on different topics. So you can choose, like there's one called the Black Box, which focuses on teaching kids about Blackness and about color in community and the Black Lives Matter movement. There's a gender box and LGBTQ boxes, which teach about, so there's toys, but then there's also a guide for parents on how to teach kids about race, about gender, about sexuality, because it has to start at home, and it has to start young, and we have to change our curriculums. Like, this all has to start with education, with a new generation of kids that are being educated about culture and educated about other people's cultures and other people's histories, right? So I'm hopeful about that as well. We have a long way to go in the public education system, well, and definitely in the private education system. But I'm hoping that because of the internet and because of a lot of these grassroots movements that we're seeing, kids will have access to a greater level of diverse education. Yeah.
Fingers crossed. I feel like we always go back to, we have these like big conversations and then we're like, I hope.
And I just really pray that that's going to happen.
Nothing, if we've learned anything from the past year, is nothing is guaranteed. Anything can happen. And
that's such a good point, right? Because it's like, if this craziness can happen, then good things can happen too that we're not expecting.
But we gotta put in the work, because if we don't, then it will slide back to back in the day, which we don't need that.
Well, and you know, the same year you have the white supremacists storming the Capitol buildings in the States. You also have the first female woman of color is sitting and holding presidential office. So, you know, there is it's
so polar opposites, it feels like.
Yeah. And that's where we just have to keep hoping that we can keep on.
Shall we take a little browse? Thank you everyone for submitting some questions here. Oh, how come I can't see this full thing? Oh Lord. Some of these are longer comments. I want to see the full comment. Can you see it when I put it up, or no?
The comment?
Yeah.
I see
Nicola is showing that ACT isn't just the glam. And it just cuts off, so I don't know what this full thing is. I'm sorry. Let's see. Ooh, this is there's so many good questions, guys.
She's amazing. Hi. She's wonderful. Like, her art is unbelievable.
Let's go follow her. Let's go follow her.
Amazing. What's my favorite thing about myself? I think probably I've been told that, and I feel it deeply. I feel other people's feelings very deeply, which, you know, has downsides as well. But I think I think my empathy. I talk very openly about this, but having been a kid with mental health issues and someone who grew up with mental health issues, and I was always aware that people had things they were afraid to talk about, that people felt ashamed, because I did. And so having gone through that at a young age, I think people trust me with their stories, and I think people trust me to keep their secrets and to not to judge them. And I think that's true of me. And so I think that's probably my favorite thing about myself.
Oh, I love that.
Be practicing what you want to do. You have to be staying engaged. And if you can't afford to take classes and you can't afford that kind of stuff, like, that's okay. Like, be getting together with friends, or now on Zoom, you know, like, pick up a scene a week.
10,000 hours thing. Just put in the work.
Is that a thing? It takes
I forget who it's someone who like wrote a book or like said it out there.
there is no substitute for two things, in my opinion. There's no substitute for always, always staying on your craft and learning, and there's no substitute for being a nice person. If you are good to work with, if you're good at your job and you're good to work with, that's what's going to get you by. I've met a lot of actors who are gorgeous and charismatic, but they're not kind, and they try and get by on things other than their work, and it never works out. It almost never works out, because at the end of the day, the two things that are most important in getting a movie made or a TV show made are being collaborative and easy to work with. If you're good with people, that's going to make all the difference. And if you're good at your job, so make sure you're training. My husband and I coach each other all the time for our auditions. We've been doing this for 20 years. We still, I call people for, you still need to be training and learning. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. And then just make sure that you do your research, and also don't get into any situations. If when you look for an agent or you go into a casting room and what you get first from someone,
In mass, I'm just like, I get it, but also I don't crave that, whatever that
yeah.
feeling is that you get from it.
Yeah, and I'm I'm an extreme temperatures person, so for me, that's very calming. Everybody knows this about me from my Instagram, but I'm also the big game changer for me in terms of my mental health. One of the big game changers was getting really committed to fitness. And I'm not talking about, losing weight. I'm talking about fitness. Like when I started weight training, when I started committing to regular exercise, that made a huge difference for me. So, for example, even if it's just taking a walk, right? Like even if it's just getting outside into fresh air. So fresh air for me calms me down. I calm down instantly when I walk out into fresh air.
Literally getting a breath of fresh air is like the key.
And the disc drive, and literally just watch a season on the couch with a duvet, especially since I'm a mom, I don't get to do that very often. So if I come home from a stressful day at work, especially during COVID, I had a really stressful day, and I'm really nervous on set right now because part of the thing is we have these shields that are really close to the face, and so I feel kind of claustrophobic, and so I feel anxious after, and I just did nothing. Also, I find I'm someone who responds well to certain medicinal things like marijuana, THC is but that's not for everyone. I'm not a drinker. I don't I know a lot of people who like a glass of wine. I'm not a drinker. It's not something that, so, it depends on the day, but generally speaking, fresh air, exercise, and also letting yourself do nothing at all, other
So
than
important.
lie down and eat and do what you want to do. So I would say it's one of those, it's sort of a balance of those two strategies.
It's all about balance, though. I think that's like the key thing is like you're not going hard on one thing or the other. It's
Yeah.
variety. That's like the theme of this conversation is like variety, diversity.
Yeah, exactly.
In life too.
Yeah. Oh, in case anyone in other countries is wondering, marijuana is legal in Canada, which is why I can say things like that in interviews. Because I'm sure there's people going like, "Why is she blaming the drug use on live IG?" But it's legal here, and for me, it's always been medicinal, and it's been very helpful for pain management as well.
There's a lot of cool questions. Sorry, we can't get to all of them. Oh, this is. I think you should do this little shout out because I know a lot of people are here because of your work on shadow hunters. So what's your favorite scene on shadow hunters?
I mean the wedding, the wedding, the final episode, the 2-hour season finale, walking Magnus down the aisle was there couldn't have been a better way to end that series for me. So that was huge. And I feel like I always feel like I have to give a second answer because that one's like so obvious. Like of course that was an amazing moment, and it's it's been publicized. So that was definitely my favorite overall. But there's a scene that we did. I've told this story many times, but there's a scene we did. It was like 5 a.m. I'd been there for like 16 hours, and we did this really emotional scene from like 2 episodes before with one of the ADs who was amazing, Celia, directing it, and it was just one of those things where we were exhausted, but it was a really emotional scene with Dom Sherwood and Matt, and we just got into a zone, a very like deep, tired, very honest emotional zone, and it's the scene where I tell, it's a scene where I tell at the end of a very long day. So those two would be my favorites.
I love that because there's something about, and that's like, the special thing about acting is it's just that feeling that you get, or the zone that you tap into that you can't describe or really define.
It's a feeling.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing, like I think we have a tendency. I came up in the theater, and there was always this feeling of like, oh, you don't get to have that in film and TV because you're not seeing the story through the way you do in theater. You're cutting and stopping and starting, but I don't think that's true. I think if you're with
Instinct.
It's funny, like I'm one of those people who really would. I'm not really interested in going back or forward faster. I'm trying very hard in my life to
be in the present.
To be here. I would probably, it's funny. My friend Lisa Berry, speaking of, representation and diversity and stuff, my friend, and just in race, and my friend Lisa Berry, who a lot of you know, an incredible, like phenomenal actor. She said, someone asked her that question once, and she said, well, they said, would you rather? No, they said, what decade would you like to have lived in the most? Right, like 40s, 50s, 60s. And she said, well, am I Black? And they were like, what do you mean? She's like, well, am I Black in this scenario when I go back in time? And they're like, yeah. And she's like, then right now, like never, not her, because the world was horrifying for Black people throughout history, and it's it's just, and now look what's happening. It's like it's barely gotten better, right? So I thought that was such an incredibly telling statement, and there's truth in that. Like, as a woman, I'm not interested in going further back in time. I feel like we're barely, I barely feel safe and able to be myself in the world in 2020, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I. You know, so for me, probably the future. Also because I want to see what happens, you know, like I don't want to change anything. I feel like things are what were supposed to happen in my life. I wouldn't be where I am. You change any one thing and it, you know, so probably to the future, to get to see what happens, and for better, for worse, try and have some positive impact on it.
Hope the future isn't The Handmaid's Tale.
Don't even, like, it can't, oh God, please no.
I just recently wrapped whatever the last season, or not wrapped, but finished watching. I want to be on that show so bad. But it's just like, it's the fact that it was written in like the 80s, I believe.
Yeah.
And it was like so relevant, and we can like just see the truth of how that.
And I remember, like, there was an American, what was it? It was the conference on, was it the conference on women's health or something? Not a conference, but it was a government. I think it was, I'm trying to remember. There's a photo of the American government to talk about women's health, had a big, and it was all white men behind a table, and that was the conversation about women's health. And I remember, and there was one woman who asked to speak, and she was told there wasn't. I think one of the things about the U.S. that I'm hoping, what's happened there, it's so devastating. I'm hoping that one positive thing that could potentially come from that is that we now know that this could happen. I think we denied that. I'm not American, I'm Canadian, but it's true in Canada as well. Like,
it's the same thing here, just a little more muted.
It's quieter, right? But I look at that, and I think we now know that we can't deny that it. There's people who hold these horrifying beliefs, but they know not to say it, and that's actually kind of scarier, because you don't know who they are.
Yeah.
You don't know who to be afraid of. One thing that I think the Trump government did, and that Trump did, is he was like, come on, be proud of your bigotry, be proud of your misogyny, be proud of that. And people went, okay. So now, and even in my own life, like, there's people in my life where I was like, oh, I didn't know you had that in you. I didn't know you felt that. When they started talking to me about the Me Too movement, it would be like, oh, but, I stand with women, but, sometimes you got to know if you go to a guy's, and I'm like, oh my God, I had no idea that or with diversity, like white friends of mine who are like, you're so lucky that you're so lucky that you're ethnic, because like white people can't get a job now. And I'm like, oh, and unfriend, like, so it's like, it's actually, there's something positive about knowing who we need to be afraid of, and knowing who we need to be aware of in saving ourselves as a culture, right? So I'm hoping that we'll get somewhere with that we've now, the cards are on the table. right?
We're having these conversations, and that is the important thing. The first step is admitting you have a problem.
Yeah.
So,
and that there's no
we got to
room
start
anymore.
somewhere.
There's no room anymore to be like, you know, it's like now when people say, people in my life say like, oh, I don't see color right away. I used to go like, okay. And now I go like, that's not a thing. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I feel more empowered also to speak up because I know now how dangerous not speaking up is because we've seen the results, right? So I'm hoping that we can avoid the Handmaid's Tale by utilizing this information, you know, because we have no one to blame. Like with this last election in the US, it was like, if they had voted him in again, that's on
their decision.
That's on that culture, right? It's, you know, and similarly here, I felt the same government here, where as a woman, I was terrified of the conservative government we had here. I was absolutely terrified. And I learned a lot about my country in those times. We all do, you know. So knowledge is power, and we have more knowledge now. So hopefully we can use that.
I love all this. We have to wrap up. I just want to make sure that we didn't. We did unfortunately miss a lot of questions, so we couldn't get to all of them. But one thing I definitely did want to touch on was your hashtag, because I think that was very important.
Ah, yes. Stuff. So anyway, it turned into a hashtag, and now it's the most ridiculously long hashtag on the planet.
But that's the part. That's part of it. It takes work to spell out all that thing. It takes work to like work on yourself.
And like, we can take 10 seconds to type it out. But yeah, the hashtag is measure your power, not your dress size. And that for me is a constant struggle. And I'm very honest about that. I'm proud when people tell me that you know, I get a lot of letters from people saying that I've helped them with their fitness and their body image and their self-esteem and their you know, their physical fitness. But really it's done so much for me because and I have power. Like I say to my husband recently, like we moved, and you know, like my brother and my husband and I, like single-handedly, we didn't hire movers. We moved an entire house of like my brother's solid teak furniture up flights of stairs, and like I can do that. I can do anything, you know. Like my son sees me lifting weights and doing stuff, and he thinks, it doesn't occur to him that women aren't physically strong as well. But it's not even just about that. Like, it's about understanding that if you're trying to fit into a dress, that's never going to give you the power emotionally. Your skin will get better. You'll be stronger physically. You'll look better.
And then you'll be more confident about yourself because you like what you're feeling in your body.
And what I've discovered is I'm the heavy, other than when I was pregnant, I'm the heaviest now that I've been in my life, other than obviously when I was actually pregnant. But I'm also the fittest, and I feel beautiful for the first time in my life. I never felt beautiful. It was like the last 2 years of my life that I've ever actually felt beautiful. And a lot of that has to do, and you know, you could probably, I'm sure there's all kinds of people who would love to do an assessment on why that's like technically untrue. You know, I have lines and I'm getting older and blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't matter, because I look in the mirror and for the first time in my life, I respect who I see. And so I feel beautiful. And a big part of that has been, and I struggle with it all the time. Like, let's be really honest, I struggle with it all the time.
Work in progress, though. It's not a light switch that you just turn on and then boom.
But it's also a practice, right? Like, it's this constant practice, and the media doesn't help. I mean, this goes back to our previous conversation, but I'm still always the largest woman on any set that I work on, and I'm a size 10, right? So I'm still constantly comparing myself to, or being compared to other women, and I have to actively, but now when I start to feel bad about myself, I go for a run or a hike, or I do a workout, and I forget about that. And I just feel good about who I am. I feel good about my body because it's strong and it's healthy, you know? So yeah, so measure your power, not your
This is your time, man. Like last time when I was talking with Olenike, which I'm sure you know, like you should check hers out. I was just like, you can just talk. There was one point where I was like speechless. I was like, I'm just listening to you. That's what I'm here for. This is your time. This is your platform. We want to hear your story.
You know who or not. If you guys don't know Olenike, look up her Instagram. She's incredible. But picture her and I on Coroner on a night suit in a car together, just the two of us all night. And we were just the conversation was amazing. That woman is, I mean, she's an incredible artist, but she's such an incredible thinker. Yeah, amazing woman. Yeah.
Shout out to her, and shout out to you too. Another amazing, inspiring live and a talk. We're new to this, but it's been such a great ride so far.
So fun. And you know, I'll come back anytime. I love chatting with you. I have so much respect for what you're doing, and you're just, for you guys, I don't know if you guys know this amazing woman, but she's an incredible person, and you just have the best energy, and I'm just really grateful to be a part of what you're doing.
Thank you so much.
And thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you everyone so much for coming out.
Get some sleep wherever you are. Thank you. You guys are the best.
You can watch this again. It's going to be saved on our IGTV.
Yay!
Yeah, we will be in touch. Like, who knows? Maybe we'll have Nicola back, because we could talk forever. But we'll probably
you know where to find me these days.
I'll be here.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you so much.
Have a good night. It was nice seeing you.
Stay safe.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.